Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Wednesday. Yom Revi'i. Let's light up the darkness. New wisdom candle. Drip. Okay. So somewhat moved today. Instead of working here in the edit bay on the movie Man in the Long Black Coat, let my editor work from his place. And Nina and I went to see our son's ball game. He's one of the captains of the baseball team. He's a senior in high school. There's just a few games left in the season. And he's going off for the summer. We're going to be empty nesters. Wow. We knew it would go by fast. It did. It did. If you're a young parent, make the most of it. Make the most of it. Who's in the house? Stephen in New Hampshire, Bill in mid-Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Shandor in the Bronx, Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire, David in South Bend, Bella in Florida, Lucy in Minnesota, Paula in Chicago, Franco in Trieste, Italy, Paul in the Great Northwest, Anne in Merced, Tom says hi, Ella says shalom, Aoife in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia, Lynn in North Texas, Marie in Freeport. Welcome everybody. Well, chapter 2 went pretty quickly here in Tractate Sotah. Today we're going to wind up chapter 2. This is the 18th volume of the Talmud, the laws of the Sotah, the suspected adulteress. Here in chapter 2, we're in the midst of Mishna number 4, and then we'll get on to Mishna number 5. And this chapter is about the procedure, right? The procedure in the temple. In the Holy Temple when it's standing. That's the only time that the Sotah ritual can be performed. And as we learned, the husband who warned her, don't seclude yourself with that man in front of witnesses. And she secluded herself with that man in front of witnesses. Then she became a Sotah, the suspected adulteress, prohibited to her husband. He's prohibited to her. They could divorce, or if she's innocent that she did not commit adultery, she can drink the water, the bitter water, which, as we see, yesterday we learned what verses are written therein. Verses are written on a scroll, just like a Torah scroll, parchment, in an ink that will dissolve. Water goes into the earthenware vessel. Dust from the floor or the ground of the tabernacle or the holy temple, as it were. And we saw there was an opening in the floor with a cover that they would use to retrieve some dust for that purpose. And then the words of these verses about the Sotah swearing this oath, and that if she's guilty, these waters will kill her. And if she's innocent, they will prove her innocence. And then those verses are put in the water, and the ink, which is meant to dissolve, it's made with a mixture of soot and water, and it dissolves in the water, causing God's name to be erased. So we don't want to do that lightly. It's a very serious matter, the Sotah ritual. So in Mishnah number 4, we examine circumstances which would render the scroll itself unfit for the Sotah ritual. If it was written at night, no, it has to be written during the day. If the words were written out of sequence, if the Sotah had not accepted the oath that she has to accept before the scroll is written, if the scroll was written and dissolved one letter at a time, if the scroll was written not on one piece of parchment but on two, and if in all these situations, the scroll would be rendered unfit for this ritual. So we pick it up here on page 18a near the top. And Rava raised a dilemma. So if one wrote 2 scrolls for 2 separate Sotahs, right, 2 different women who were suspected adulteresses, could he use one scroll for both of them, right? So he wrote 2 scrolls for 2 women, all right, so far so good. But then he erased both of the scrolls in one cup. Right? Each woman is supposed to have her own earthenware vessel with dust and her own scroll. So what if both scrolls were dissolved into one cup? Then what is the law? Do we require that only the writing be performed for the sake of a specific woman, in which case that is accomplished here since they had separate scrolls? Or perhaps we require that also the erasure be performed for the sake of a specific woman, which is not accomplished here since both scrolls were erased together in one vessel of water. And if you say that we require that also the erasing be for the sake of each specific woman, then if the priest erased them in two different cups and afterward mixed the water from both cups together again, then what is the law? Do we require that only the erasing be for the sake of the specific woman, in which case that has been accomplished here? Or perhaps, since this Sotah does not drink from only her own water, and that Sotah does not drink only from her own water, but now their waters have been mixed, has this water now become disqualified? And furthermore, I'm sure you're sitting there thinking, why would they ever mix the water? Why would they mix the water? Obviously, it needs to be kept separate. Why would you complicate things by mixing the water? It doesn't matter whether this ever happened or would happen. They're asking so that we can sharpen our understanding of the law. Since we've already established that each woman gets her own earthenware vessel and her own scroll, and she's going to drink her own water, they're testing our understanding of the law, what happens if the water is mixed. And furthermore, if you say that the water is disqualified because this Sotah does not drink from only her own water and that one does not drink only from her own water, well, what if after mixing the 2 cups of water together, the priest then divided them again into 2 cups and gave one to each? What is the law then? Is there retroactive clarification, in which case one may claim that each woman drank her own water? Or is there no retroactive clarification? And the Gemara responds to all these questions, Taiku. That dilemma or these dilemmas shall stand unresolved. Now, Rava raised a different dilemma. If the priest administered the bitter water to the Sotah to drink through a palm fiber, what is the law? Or if he administered it through a tube, what is the law? Tube. What if she drank it through a straw? Has she drunk the bitter water? And what if it was a paper straw? And what if it was a plastic straw, right? You could ask all these questions. So then what is the law? Is this considered a normal manner of drinking? Or is it not considered a normal manner of drinking, in which case the act is invalid? And the Gemara responds, Taiku, these dilemmas were never answered. Rav Ashi raised a dilemma. If some of the water of the Sotah spilled out and some of it remained in the cup, then what is the law? Is it sufficient for the woman to drink some of the water in which her own scroll has been erased? Or must she drink all of the water? And the Gemara responds, that dilemma shall stand unresolved. Rabbi Zera says that Rav says, with regard to the 2 oaths that are stated with regard to the Sotah, and the priest shall cause her to swear, Numbers 5:19. And the priest shall cause the woman to swear with the oath of cursing, Numbers 5:21. So there's 2 verses calling for her to swear an oath. Does that mean that she swears one oath and it's referred to twice in the Torah? Or does that mean that she has to swear 2 separate oaths? Why are they both necessary? Meaning 2 oaths, right? 2 separate oaths. One must be administered before the scroll is erased in the bitter water, and one must be administered after it is erased. Now, Rav objects to this. Both of the oaths are written in the Torah before any mention of the scroll being erased, right? The ink dissolving in the water. So what is the basis to claim that one oath was administered after the scroll has been dissolved in the water, or the ink has been dissolved in the water? So rather, Rava said, while both oaths are administered before the Sotah drinks, the 2 oaths are different. One is an oath that has a curse with it, and one is an oath that does not have a curse with it. And the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances of an oath that has a curse with it? What is the language of this oath? And Rav Amram says that Rav says, the priest says to the Sotah, I administer an oath to you that you are honest in your claim that you were not defiled, meaning you did not commit adultery. As if you were defiled, all these curses will come upon you. And Rava said, this is insufficient, as the curse stands by itself and the oath stands by itself. They are separate statements, and it cannot be considered to be an oath with a curse. Rather, Rava said, the priest says, I administer an oath to you that if you were defiled, all these curses will come upon you. Right? And she's going to answer amen to that, so she's the one taking the oath, even though the priest is saying this to her. So Rav Ashi said, no. Even this is insufficient, as there is a curse, but there is no oath that she was not defiled. Rather, Rav Ashi said, the priest must say like this, I administer an oath to you that you were not defiled, and that if you were defiled, all these curses will come upon you. Here, the oath itself includes the curse. So that is one of the, is that the two oaths? Or is this the oath with the curse in it? I think this is the oath with the curse in it. The other oath is the simple, she says, I did not commit adultery. I was not defiled. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 4. With regard to what does she say? Here, Mishnah number 5. With regard to what does she say, Amen, Amen, as detailed in Numbers 5:22? She says it twice, as recorded in that verse. So the Mishnah explains that these two amens include the following. Amen on the curse, as she accepts the curse upon herself if she is guilty, and amen on the oath, as she declares that she is not defiled. And she's saying, I did not commit adultery. And if I did commit adultery, I accept that I will receive the curse of the bitter water, meaning I will die, right? This water with the ink and the dirt in it will cause her to die miraculously if she is guilty of adultery with that man that she secluded herself with after she was warned not to. She states, Amen, if I committed adultery with this man about whom I was warned. Amen, if I committed adultery with another man. Amen, that I did not stray when I was betrothed, nor after I was married, nor as a widow waiting for my yavam, now we're in 18b, to perform levirate marriage, yibum, since a woman at that stage is prohibited from engaging in sexual intercourse with any men, nor when married through levirate marriage to the yavam, amen, that I did not become defiled, and if I did become defiled, may all these curses come upon me. Very interesting. She became a Sotah because she secluded herself with a particular man that her husband warned her, do not seclude yourself with that man. He gave the warning in front of witnesses, and then she went into seclusion with that particular man, and witnesses saw that. But now, when she comes to Jerusalem to drink the bitter water, it's the particular man and the warning, etc., that brought her here. But when she takes this vow, she needs to be innocent of all adultery, or she better just admit that she committed adultery, accept the divorce, and go on her way. She's not only saying amen to the oath and the curse with respect to the particular guy, but now she's made to swear that she never committed adultery while she was married, even during the time of betrothal. Now, Rabbi Meir says that is the view of the anonymous Tana of our Mishnah. Rabbi Meir says that amen, amen means amen, that I did not become defiled in the past, amen, that I will not become defiled in the future. All agree that he, the husband, may stipulate with her through this oath, neither with regard to what she did before becoming betrothed to him, nor with regard to what she will do after she becomes divorced from him. And similarly, if a husband divorced his wife, and while they were divorced, she secluded herself with another man and became defiled, that she committed, that she had sex with that man. And afterward, her husband took her back and remarried her. And he then warned her about a specific man, and she secluded herself, and she is now a Sotah, and she comes to Jerusalem, to the Holy Temple, to drink the water of the Sotah. So the husband cannot stipulate with her that she take an oath that she did not become defiled during the period in which she was divorced. And this is because her husband would become forbidden to her only if she married another man after he had divorced her, right? A couple can divorce and then marry again as long as she didn't marry another man during the time that she was divorced from her first husband. If she just had sex, that's not going to render her prohibited to remarry her first husband. It's considered promiscuous, it's a transgression, it's an avera, it's a sin, but it's not going to render her prohibited to remarry her first husband. And now this is the principle. In every case where, if she would engage in sexual intercourse with someone else, she would not become forbidden to her husband due to this act, so he may not stipulate with her that her oath include that act. The oath can include only cases in which she would be rendered forbidden to him. So it's interesting, I don't think that she is necessarily told to make an oath that she, in addition to not committing adultery with the person that was named by her husband that he warned her about, don't seclude yourself with him. But he has the option to say to her and swear that you never committed adultery at all while we've been married, or even while we've been betrothed, which is the same as being married. I think he doesn't have to make that stipulation. He certainly has to make her swear that she didn't sleep with the guy that she was warned about. I think it's optional for the husband to demand this further stipulation that she has never committed adultery while they were married. What is the law about this? Let me read you the halachas where the law came out before we go on to the Gemara. Amen, that I will not become defiled. The husband may stipulate that the woman include in her oath that she will not commit adultery in the future, even if he divorces and remarries her. If she will commit adultery in the future, after such an oath, the water of the Sotah will then evaluate her in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. I'm not sure I understand that. Are they saying that she became a Sotah, she was a suspected adulteress, they went to Jerusalem, and then she has to take the oath that she didn't actually have sex with the man she was warned about. And while she's there, the husband can say, okay, and swear you will never commit adultery. And she says, amen. And then if in the future she commits adultery, she's going to drop dead. I think that's what this is saying. Second halacha. The husband may not have the Sotah include in her oath that she did not engage in sexual intercourse with another man before she was betrothed or during a period of divorce from him. He has no rights over her before they were betrothed and while they were divorced, and he cannot. And if she had sex with someone else, it's not his business. No swearing of the Sotah about that. And this is the principle. A husband may stipulate that his wife include in her oath any case of adultery that would render her forbidden to him if she were guilty of it. And he may not stipulate that she include in her oath any case that would not. And a widow awaiting her yavam, right, so as we talked about in the case of yibum, right, we learned in Yavamos, that if a man dies childless, and he leaves a brother and a widow, so then the widow and the brother, right, have a yibum obligation to each other. And they can either marry, and then their first child is considered the heir of the brother who died, or they can choose not to marry, in which case they perform the chalitza ritual, and then they're free to go their separate ways. But until they perform a yibum and get married, or chalitza and part company, they have the bond of the yavama, right? The yavama and her yavam. So while they have that bond, she is prohibited to go have sex with some other guy, right? They have this bond together. So a widow awaiting her yavam, that's that status. If a widow waiting for her yavam to perform yibum commits adultery, she is permitted to the yavam in accordance with the conclusion of the Gemara and contrary to the opinion of Rav Hamnuna that we're going to discuss now. That's surprising, right? She's not permitted to go and have sex with some other man while she's awaiting her yavam. if she does that, she's committed a sin. It is definitely a transgression. But it does not render her prohibited to marry her Yavam, to perform Yibum with him. Unlike if she did this with her husband, right? If she committed adultery, then she would not be permitted to her husband. So they're making a distinction between a woman who is married and a woman who is awaiting her Yavam in terms of this outcome. Here's the Gemara on Mishnah number 5. Rav Hamnuna says, in the case of a widow awaiting her Yavam who committed adultery, she becomes forbidden to her Yavam, right? This opinion was overruled. From where is this derived, according to Rav Hamnuna? It is from the fact that the Mishnah teaches, nor as a widow waiting for my Yavam to perform levirate marriage, nor when married through levirate marriage. And the Gemara explains, granted, if you say that a woman waiting Yibum and she commits adultery is forbidden to the Yavam, the brother. So due to that reason, a husband may stipulate with a Sotah that she take a note that she did not commit adultery while she was awaiting Yibum with him. But if you say that such a woman does not become forbidden, then how can a husband stipulate this with her? But didn't we learn in the Mishnah that this is the principle in every case where if she would engage in sexual intercourse with someone else, then if she would not become forbidden to her husband due to that act, then he may not stipulate to her about this when she's a Sotah. In other words, let's say that a woman, there's a widow, her husband died, and now she's awaiting Yibum with his brother, and maybe that takes a while to resolve itself. Maybe there's a year, right, before they finally make the decision to go ahead and get married. And during that year, maybe she slept with someone. It's a sin, but she did it. She doesn't become prohibited, as we just learned, to her Yavam. So then they decide to get married. And then, he becomes a little suspicious of her behavior. Maybe she even sees that guy, That's not even, I'm sorry, that's a complication. He becomes suspicious of her with some other random guy. And he says to her, don't seclude yourself with that man in front of witnesses. She secludes herself with that man and it's witnessed. So now they come down to Jerusalem because the temple is still standing. And she's a Sotah, and she's going to drink the bitter waters. And the main reason that she's there is to say, I did not cheat with you since we've been married. While they're there, can he say to her and stipulate that you did not commit adultery while you were awaiting to marry me, while you were a Yavama, my brother's widow, and waiting to get married with me? Stipulate about that. Now, that should not be possible because even if she did it, she's still permitted to marry him. So he should not be permitted to make her to swear an oath that she did not commit that action during that period before they performed Yibum and got married. So what's going to happen? So they say in the West, the land of Israel, as opposed to Babylonia, that the law is not in accordance with the opinion of Rav Hamnuna. A woman awaiting Yibum who commits adultery does not become forbidden to the Yavam. Okay, that's the law. So the Gemara asks, well, but with regard to that which is taught in the Mishnah, nor as a widow waiting for my Yavam to perform levirate marriage, nor when married through levirate marriage, in accordance with whose opinion is this? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says, betrothal does not take effect even for those who would be merely liable for violating ordinary prohibitions were they to be married, right? If they were married, it's a different situation, right? If somebody is married and you commit adultery, and actually if you were warned not to do that and you did it right after the warning, that's a death penalty offense. But just doing a promiscuous act when you are not married or not betrothed, that's what's considered an ordinary transgression, not a death penalty offense. Right now, I know we had a question after yesterday's class that if a Sotah, who's warned by the priest, my daughter, if you committed the adultery, just admit it so that you don't die when you drink the bitter water. And somebody said, well, if adultery is a death penalty offense, isn't she, going to lose either way? Isn't she going to lose her life either way? And the answer is no, because it might be a death penalty offense, but you only get the death penalty, in capital things like idolatry or murder or let's not talk about murder, but idolatry or adultery, right? It's only going to be the death penalty if someone says to you, hey, listen, if you do that action, it's a death penalty offense. And then the person does it immediately after receiving the warning and in the presence of witnesses. Now, a Sotah who comes and she was alone and there were no witnesses to the actual defilement, and she admits that she committed adultery, she does not become liable to the death penalty. There were no witnesses, there was no warning, and her own confession does not render her liable to the death penalty because there was no warning right before the action, and you can't self-incriminate. Her confession means they have to divorce, and she's not going to get her ketubah payment. But for the capital crime of adultery, no, it does not render her liable to that because you can't be a witness against yourself in that situation. Okay, so so what they're saying here is that if a yavama, right, this widow, has sex with somebody, definitely a sin, but not a death penalty offense, rather an ordinary transgression. Strong one, right, but not a death penalty offense. And therefore, and so Rabbi Akiva therefore holds that just as a wife who commits adultery, rendering her liable to receive kares, right, death at the hands of the heavenly court, even so right, the earthly court won't impose a death penalty, but a wife who commits adultery, she might be liable to kares. Now, what is kares? Can atonement, sort of change the decree from heaven? That's a discussion for another day. What does kares mean? Will somebody die early? Will they suffer in their life? What does it mean? Many different opinions about that. But it's not death penalty from an earthly court. So, therefore, Rabbi Akiva holds that just as a wife who commits adultery, rendering her liable to receive kares, is forbidden to her husband and must be divorced, so too a widow awaiting her yavam who commits adultery, violating an ordinary Torah prohibition, is considered to be a woman forbidden to her yavam. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva would agree with Rabbi Hamnuna, but both of them are in the minority. That is not the law. So Rabbi Yirmiyah raised a dilemma. If a man divorced his wife and then he remarried her, and she then secluded herself and came to drink the water of a Sotah, so what is the law as to whether a man in that situation may stipulate with her concerning their first marriage? May he compel her to include in her oath that she did not commit adultery then either? And similarly, may a yavam stipulate with his yavama concerning the marriage of his brother, requiring her to attest that she did not commit adultery prior to the brother's death? What is the law? Now the Gemara proposes, come in here, evidence from the conclusion of our Mishnah. This is the principle. In every case where if she would engage in sexual intercourse with someone else, she would not become forbidden to her husband due to this act. The husband may not stipulate with her that her oath include that she was innocent of this act. So one may therefore infer that he may indeed stipulate with her concerning any case in which she would become forbidden. Now, in both of the cases in question, the woman would have become forbidden to her husband if she had been guilty. Therefore, the Gemara conclude from the Mishnah that he is entitled to stipulate in these cases, right? Because if she cheated on the brother before he died, at that point she became prohibited to him and would not qualify for yibum upon her husband's death. Likewise, if a couple were married, they divorced, they remarried, he became suspicious during their second marriage, and she became a Sotah. She's going to drink the bitter waters to say that she was innocent of adultery with this man, that she was warned about during her second marriage. Now the husband can say, okay, and during our first marriage, did you ever sleep with someone? And he can make her swear that oath if he chooses. Now the Mishnah teaches, Rabbi Meir says that amen, amen, two amens, means amen that I did not become defiled in the past, amen that I will not become defiled in the future. Now with regard to this, it is taught in a Baraisa, so Sefta 2:2, when Rabbi Meir said, amen that I will not become defiled in the future, he did not mean to say that if God knows that she will become defiled in the future, the water that she drinks now evaluates whether she will be unfaithful and passes judgment on her from now. Rabbi Meir did not mean that when she says, I will not commit adultery in the future, the husband can make her swear that oath, according to Rabbi Meir. But he did not mean that at that point God would look into the future and say, well, this woman is going to commit adultery, so she's going to receive the death by the bitter water right now. No, right? We do not punish people for acts they have not yet committed. Even God does not punish people for acts they have not yet committed. We actually learned that with the case of Ishmael, right? There's a whole midrash about this, that when Sarah told Abraham that she doesn't want this boy Ishmael, Hagar's son, in her house anymore because he has been somehow bullying or possibly molesting or somehow a danger to her young son Isaac, and she wants Ishmael out, right? And so then Abraham has to push Hagar and her son Ishmael, who's like a teenager, out of the house. And they go out into the desert and they're like dying of thirst, and they could have died right there. Now Ishmael and his descendants would be at war with the Jewish people in the future. And God knew that. So why didn't God just let Ishmael die in the wilderness? And from that we learn that people always have the opportunity to change their conduct, and we do have free will. And even though God might know what we're going to do in the future, nonetheless, we're never punished for acts that we have not yet committed, even if God knows we're going to commit them, because there's always a chance that the person will reach inside and somehow change his destiny by making teshuvah, right? By making an atonement, a proper atonement. So Rabbi Meir did not mean that. Rather, Rabbi Meir meant that in the event that she becomes defiled in the future, the water that she drinks now will destabilize her and evaluate her then whether she was unfaithful. Right? So it's what I said earlier. If the husband makes her swear now that you'll never commit adultery in the future, and she says amen, then in the future, if she commits adultery, she'll drop dead. The water will act then. It's miraculous water. So Rav Ashi raised a dilemma. What is the law as to whether a man may stipulate with his wife concerning a later marriage, in the event that he would divorce her and then remarry her? Do we say, well, now at least, if she remains faithful during this marriage, she is not forbidden to him? Or perhaps this includes a later marriage, as sometimes a man divorces his wife and remarries her, and if she then commits adultery, she will then be forbidden to him. So the Gemara answers, come and hear evidence from the Mishna. All agree that he may stipulate with her through this oath, neither with regard to what she did before becoming betrothed to him, nor with regard to what she will do after she becomes divorced from him. And if, while divorced, she secluded herself with another man and became defiled, and afterward her husband took her back and remarried her, he may not stipulate with her with regard to the period when they were divorced, since that act does not render her forbidden to him. And the Gemara infers, but if he remarries her and she then becomes defiled, she would be forbidden to him. Therefore, he may indeed stipulate with her in advance with regard to this. And the Gemara states, indeed, conclude from the Mishnah that this is so. Sages taught, the verse states, this is the law of jealousy, Numbers 5:29, indicating that the same law is to be carried out in all cases of jealousy. And this teaches that the woman drinks and repeats, i.e., she must drink a second time if she becomes a Sotah again. It could happen, right? He warned her, don't seclude yourself with that particular man. She did it. They went to Jerusalem. She drank the waters. They went back to their lives because she was innocent, and they became permitted to each other again. And then she was doing that same kind of behavior again, either with the same guy or with a different guy. And then what? He warned her not to in front of witnesses. She secludes herself. Witnesses see that. Can she become a Sotah for a second time? Can she become a Sotah for a second time with respect to the same man she was warned about the first time? Can she become a Sotah again with respect to a different man that she's warned about in the second example? Let's learn. The Brisa continues. Rabbi Yehuda says, the word this in the verse is a restricting term, indicating that the woman does not drink and repeat. And Rabbi Yehuda said There was an incident in which Nehunya the ditch digger testified before us in the name of his teachers that the woman drinks and repeats. And we accepted his testimony with regard to 2 men, but not with regard to 1 man. Even if she drinks the water of a Sotah while married to her first husband, she must drink again after violating a warning by her second husband. However, 1 husband cannot have his wife drink twice. The same woman can be a Sotah twice, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but only by 2 different husbands. 1 husband can only make his wife become a Sotah and drink the bitter water once. Only 1 episode of that. What is the law? If a man warned his wife concerning another man, and after secluding herself with him, she drank the waters of a Sotah and she was found innocent, the husband may not compel her to drink a second time due to suspicion with regard to the same man. However, he may compel her to drink a second time if he suspects her with regard to another man. Right? So the same husband can make his wife drink Sotah waters twice, but only with respect to 2 different men. I mean, if she is secluding herself with different men after she's been warned about 2 different guys, something's wrong in this marriage, right? If a Sotah who drank waters of a Sotah and was found innocent was widowed or divorced and remarried another man, and her new husband suspects her with regard to the same man that her first husband suspected, he may compel her to drink a second time on that man's account. So the Baraisa concludes, and the rabbis say, right, the rabbis who overrule Rabbi Yehuda, the woman does not drink and repeat, whether with regard to 1 man or with regard to 2 men. The Gemara asks, but according to the first Tana of the Baraisa as well, isn't it written in the verse, this, restricting the number of times a woman must drink? And according to the rabbis mentioned later in the Baraisa as well, isn't it written the law of jealousy, amplifying the number of times a woman must drink to include all cases of jealousy? So Rav said, different laws apply to different cases. With regard to 1 husband who accused his wife twice about 1 lover, everyone agrees that the woman does not drink and repeat. As it is written, this is the law of jealousy, and the word this is a restricting term that excludes that possibility. With regard to 2 different husbands and 2 different lovers, where her first husband suspected her with regard to 1 lover during her first marriage, and the second husband suspected her with regard to a different man during the second marriage, everyone agrees that the woman drinks and repeats. As it is written, this is the law of jealousy in all cases of jealousy. And now we're on 19a, but we're going to finish chapter 2. And they disagree when there is 1 husband and 2 lovers, i.e. where 1 husband warned her with regard to a second lover after she survived her first ordeal. And they also disagree in a case where 2 husbands are jealous of the same lover. If her second husband accused her with regard to the same lover on account of whom she was compelled to drink by her first husband. So the opinions are justified like this. The first Tana holds that the phrase, the law of jealousy, serves to include all of these cases. In almost all cases, the woman drinks and repeats. The word this serves to exclude only the case of 1 husband and 1 lover, in which case she does not drink and repeat. And the rabbis mentioned later in the Baraisa hold that the word this serves to exclude all these cases. The woman almost never drinks and repeats. The phrase the law of jealousy serves to include only the case of 2 husbands and 2 lovers, in which case she does drink and repeat. And Rabbi Yehuda holds the word this serves to exclude 2 of the cases, and the phrase the law of jealousy serves to include 2. The word this excludes 2 cases of 1 husband and 1 lover and 1 husband and 2 lovers. In neither of these cases does the woman drink and repeat, according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the phrase the law of jealousy serves to include 2 cases, i.e. 2 husbands and 1 lover, and all the more so 2 husbands and 2 lovers. In both of these cases, the woman does drink and repeat. And we finished chapter 2, and now I'm coming to your questions and comments. Tomorrow, Thursday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, we will pick up with page 19 and the beginning, Mishna number 1 of chapter 3 here in Tractate Sotah. All right, let's go to questions and comments. Come on, load. This is Sotah 18. Tom, I thought, I was having the same thought, Tom. I thought having sex was tantamount to marriage. So if a divorced woman has sex with some other man, how can she still remarry her husband? And they're saying here, no, if she has sex, that just counts as promiscuity. So then that's not going to render her prohibited to remarry her husband. And don't we say, I'm not sure, I don't know what the answer to your question is. Because, one of the ways to betroth, right, and to be essentially become marriage, right? One way is to sign the ketubah. Another way is to give her an item, right? Like you give her a ring or you give her something to signal that you're becoming betrothed. And a third way is to sleep together. But it seems like perhaps there has to be some kind of intent that the sleeping together should become a betrothal. Whereas if she's just being promiscuous, it doesn't become a marriage. It's definitely an aveira. It's definitely a sin, right? It's definitely something she's going to be held accountable for, and so will her lover. But they don't necessarily become betrothed through that act. And if it somehow clearly was not a betrothal, then she would remain permitted to remarry her first husband. Sharon, it actually makes sense that a Yavama, right, the widow of a man who dies childless, should not be able to marry the husband's brother if she was adulterous, because she's supposed to be building up her dead husband's name by his brother. What if the child is from the other man and not the brother? Perfect. Exactly. Well put, Sharon. Sharon, I had a question yesterday that was not addressed. If the priest uses a scroll improperly, does the process have to begin all over again? In other words, if the scroll was rendered unfit because he split the writing on two scrolls, or he used improper ink that wouldn't dissolve, or he did, two women's scrolls in one, all those different cases that we saw where it would render the scroll unfit, then what? It would seem to me, I didn't see the answer on the text, but it would seem to me that the scroll is unfit, but it's not like the procedure is now tossed out. They just have to rewrite the scroll and write it in a proper manner. What would be interesting is, what if, they wrote the scroll, let's say on two pieces of parchment. It was like one piece of parchment that came apart, right? And then it became two. But they just barreled forward. They put it in the water, and she drank the water. And then they realized that the scroll had been unfit, but they went forward anyway. Then what? Does she repeat the process with the proper scroll? I don't know. Great question. Joseph asks, if the accusation of adultery applies to a particular man, does that mean women were not generally forbidden to seclude with other men? I'm not sure I understand your question, Joseph. But the reason that there's no Sotah, I don't know, there is no masculine Sotah, right? It's the wife is the suspected adulteress. We don't have an equivalent of the suspected adulterer. And one answer might be, well, it's a patriarchal system. But I think probably the more accurate answer is that because a man could have multiple wives under Torah law. Now, eventually, the rabbis decreed no. And they decreed that quite early. We see even in the Talmud, even in the Mishna, but I think by the time of the Mishna, certainly by the time of the Gemara, the sages were saying it's not permitted for a man to have multiple wives. But under Torah law, it is permitted. But then like about 1,000 years ago, who is it, Rabbi Gershon, said that's it. It's over. It is absolutely prohibited and will remain prohibited for a man to have more than one wife. But you can see how under Torah law, the fact that a man can have more than one wife would mean that even if he slept with someone else who's not his wife, it would not have the same kind of impact, because he would have the option of marrying that woman, and he hasn't harmed his first wife by doing that, because under Torah law you can have multiple wives. So that's why we don't have this sort of male equivalent of the Sotah. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific, the regular time, and open